The snow was already 3 feet deep when I heard the loud banging on my front door that would change everything about how I viewed my neighborhood forever. I'd been sitting in my home office, listening to the howling wind and watching the blizzard pile more snow against our windows in our Lakewood subdivision outside Denver, Colorado. The power had gone out 6 hours ago, but thanks to my commercial-grade generator humming away in the backyard, our house remained warm and lit while the rest of the neighborhood sat in darkness. I could hear the steady drone of the machine through the walls, a comforting reminder that my family wouldn't freeze during what meteorologists were calling the worst winter storm to hit Colorado in 30 years. The banging came again, more insistent this time. I got up from my desk and made my way through the living room, where my wife Rachel was on yet another emergency call. She'd been on the phone nonstop since the storm started, coordinating response efforts across the county in her role as the Emergency Management Director for Jefferson County. Our 2 kids were upstairs playing video games, blissfully unaware that most of their friends were sitting in cold, dark houses right now. I opened the door to find Patricia Donnelly, the president of our homeowners association, standing on my porch with 2 other HOA board members I recognized as Sharon Miller and Dale Ramsey. Patricia was a woman in her mid-50s with that particular haircut that screamed, "I want to speak to the manager," and an expression that looked like she'd been sucking on lemons for the past decade. "Mr. Peterson," Patricia said, her voice dripping with false politeness, "we need to discuss your generator situation." I blinked at her, genuinely confused. "My generator? What about it?" "It's creating an unfair living situation in the community," Patricia continued, clutching a folder to her chest like a shield. "Not everyone has a generator, and it's not equitable for you to have power when your neighbors don't." I actually laughed. I couldn't help it. "You're joking, right? You came out in a blizzard to tell me it's not fair that I prepared for an emergency." Sharon stepped forward, her face pinched with what I assumed was supposed to be concern. "Several residents have called to complain about the noise. The HOA bylaws clearly state that excessive noise is prohibited, and your generator has been running for hours." "The power is out across the entire area," I said slowly, as if speaking to children. "Of course my generator is running. That's what generators do during power outages." Dale pulled out his phone, squinting at the screen. "According to Article 7, Section 3 of the HOA Covenant, any outdoor mechanical equipment must have prior written approval from the Architectural Review Committee. Did you submit the proper forms before installing this generator?" I felt my jaw clench. "I installed that generator 4 years ago. Nobody said anything about forms then." "Well, we're saying something now," Patricia said, her voice taking on a sharper edge. "And given the current emergency situation, the board has voted to temporarily confiscate your generator to be used as a community resource. It can be set up at the clubhouse to provide power for all residents who need it." For a moment, I just stared at them, certain I'd misheard. "You want to take my generator? The one I paid for, that's on my property, to put it in the clubhouse, for the good of the community," Patricia said primly. "In times of crisis, we must all make sacrifices. The clubhouse can serve as a warming center, and your generator would power the heating system there." "Absolutely not," I said flatly. "That generator is keeping my house warm and powered. My wife is coordinating emergency response for the entire county from our home office right now." "This is insane." Patricia's expression hardened. "Then you leave us no choice. According to the Emergency Powers Clause in the HOA bylaws, the board has the authority to take necessary actions during crisis situations for the welfare of the community. If you don't surrender the generator voluntarily, we'll be forced to have it removed." "Removed," I repeated. "You mean stolen from my property, confiscated for community use," Sharon corrected. "There's a difference." "No, there really isn't," I said. "You need to leave. Now." Patricia pulled a piece of paper from her folder and thrust it at me. "This is official notice of the board's decision. You have 30 minutes to shut down the generator and make it available for removal, or we'll take action ourselves. And there will be significant fines for non-compliance." I took the paper, more out of shock than anything else. "You've lost your minds, all of you." "We're trying to help the community," Dale said defensively. "You're being selfish." "I'm being selfish for using my own property that I bought with my own money." My voice was rising now. "How about you all prepare for emergencies like responsible adults, instead of trying to steal from the one person who actually did?" Patricia drew herself up to her full height, which was still about 6 inches shorter than me. 30 minutes, Mr. Peterson. We'll be back with bolt cutters if necessary." She turned on her heel and marched away, her companions following like ducklings. I stood there for a moment, watching them trudge through the snow toward Patricia's massive SUV before closing the door. This couldn't be real. This had to be some kind of fever dream brought on by stress and too much coffee. "Who was that?" Rachel's voice came from behind me. She'd finished her call and was looking at me with raised eyebrows. "You're not going to believe this," I said, handing her the paper. "The HOA wants to confiscate our generator." Rachel took the notice and read it, her expression shifting from confusion to disbelief, to something that looked a lot like anger. My wife was usually calm and collected, the kind of person who could handle multiple crises simultaneously without breaking a sweat. But right now, her face was flushing red. "They want to what?" she said quietly, which was somehow more intimidating than if she'd been yelling. "Take the generator to run the clubhouse as a warming center," I explained. "Said it's not fair that we have power when other people don't. They're coming back in 30 minutes with bolt cutters." Rachel pulled out her phone, her fingers flying across the screen. "What's Patricia's last name again?" "Donnelly." "Yeah, why?" "Because she's about to learn what emergency management powers actually look like," Rachel said grimly. "And they don't include stealing private property during a declared state of emergency." "Wait, what are you doing?" Rachel held up a finger as someone answered her call. "Hey, Tom, it's Rachel Navarro. I need you to do me a favor. Can you look up the property records for anyone on the board of the Lakewood Meadows HOA, specifically Patricia Donnelly, Sharon Miller, and Dale Ramsey?" She paused, listening. "Because one of them is about to commit a crime, and I want to know exactly who I'm dealing with." I watched as my wife paced back and forth, occasionally making notes on a pad of paper she'd grabbed from the kitchen counter. This was Rachel in full director mode, the version of her that coordinated disaster responses and managed teams of emergency personnel across an entire county. Perfect. "And Tom, can you send a deputy out to our address?" "Yes, Lakewood Meadows. No emergency yet, but I want someone here just in case." She rattled off our address. "Thanks. I owe you one." She hung up and turned to me. "Okay, so here's what's happening. Governor issued a state of emergency declaration 6 hours ago, which means certain laws are in effect regarding theft and tampering with emergency equipment. If they actually try to take our generator, they'll be committing a felony." "You're kidding." "Nope. During a declared state of emergency, tampering with or stealing equipment necessary for life safety is automatically elevated to a felony offense. Plus, since you're housing a county emergency management director who's actively coordinating response efforts, this residence is technically being used as an auxiliary emergency operations center. They'd be interfering with emergency operations." I felt a grin spreading across my face. You're going to throw the book at them. I'm going to throw the entire library, Rachel corrected. But first, I need to make a few more calls. Can you go check on the generator, make sure it's secured? I headed out the back door, pulling on my heavy coat and boots. The cold hit me like a physical force, the wind driving snow into my face. I had to lean into it to make progress across the deck and down the steps to where the generator sat on its concrete pad, enclosed in a weather-resistant steel housing I'd installed specifically to protect it from the elements. The machine was running smoothly, its diesel engine purring along without any issues. I'd spent good money on this setup, a 15-kilowatt Generac that could run for days on a full tank of fuel. I had another 60 gallons of diesel stored in approved containers in the garage, enough to keep us going for at least a week if necessary. I checked the locks on the housing, making sure everything was secure. The whole setup had cost me almost $12,000, but moments like this made every penny worth it. I'd grown up in Minnesota, where winter storms were a fact of life, and my dad had drilled into me the importance of emergency preparedness. When Rachel and I bought this house 5 years ago, installing a whole house generator was one of my first priorities. The HOA had sent someone around to look at it back then, some guy from the architectural committee who'd poked around for 5 minutes before declaring it was fine. I'd never heard another word about it until today. By the time I got back inside, my face was numb from the cold and my coat was covered in snow. Rachel was still on the phone, but she waved me over. Yes, that's correct. They threatened to remove it with bolt cutters if he didn't voluntarily surrender it. She listened for a moment. Right, exactly. Okay, thanks, I appreciate it. She ended the call and looked at me. Deputy should be here in about 15 minutes. They're sending someone from the station in Lakewood since the closest patrol units are all dealing with accident calls. Is this really necessary? I asked. I mean, I know Patricia is obnoxious, but you think she'll actually try to take it? As if in answer, we heard the sound of an engine outside. I looked out the front window to see Patricia's SUV pulling up again, this time with a small trailer attached. The same 3 people got out, along with 2 men I didn't recognize, all of them bundling up against the wind. That answer your question, Rachel said dryly. We watched as the group trudged through the snow around the side of our house, heading for the backyard. Patricia was gesturing animatedly, pointing toward where the generator was located. One of the men was indeed carrying bolt cutters. Okay, they're actually doing this, I said, feeling a surge of anger. They're actually going to try to steal our generator. Rachel was already heading for the back door. Come on, I want this on camera. We stepped out onto the deck just as the group reached the generator pad. Patricia looked up and saw us, her expression hardening. Mr. Peterson, we gave you 30 minutes, she called out over the wind. That time is up. We're acting under the emergency powers granted to the HOA board. No, Rachel said, her voice carrying clearly despite the storm. You're committing attempted theft during a state of emergency, which is a felony. Patricia's eyes narrowed as she looked at Rachel. And who are you, Rachel Navarro? I'm the Emergency Management Director for Jefferson County, and you need to step away from that generator right now. There was a moment of stunned silence. Sharon actually took a step back, but Patricia held her ground. I don't care who you are, Patricia said, her voice shaking slightly. This is HOA business. You have no authority here. Actually, during a declared state of emergency which was issued by the governor 6 hours ago, I have quite a bit of authority, Rachel said calmly. She pulled out her phone and held it up. And I'm recording this, by the way, for documentation purposes. Dale looked at Patricia nervously. Maybe we should reconsider this. No, Patricia snapped. She's bluffing. The HOA has legal authority to manage community resources during emergencies. I checked with our attorney. Really? Rachel asked. What's your attorney's name? Because I'd love to know what lawyer told you it was legal to steal private property during a disaster. It's not stealing, it's requisitioning, Sharon said, but her voice lacked conviction. Is there paperwork? Rachel asked. Did you file an official request with the county? Did you offer fair compensation? Did you get a court order? Because requisitioning private property during an emergency requires all of those things. What you're doing is just theft with extra steps. The man with the bolt cutters was looking increasingly uncomfortable. Look, lady, I'm just here to help move the thing. I don't want any legal trouble. Then you should leave, Rachel said. Because in about 10 minutes there's going to be a sheriff's deputy here and anyone who's damaged or attempted to remove this generator will be arrested. Patricia's face was turning an interesting shade of red. You can't arrest us for enforcing HOA rules. I'm not arresting anyone. The sheriff's department will handle that. But let me be clear about what will happen if you damage that generator. First, you'll be charged with felony theft and vandalism during a state of emergency. Second, since this property is currently serving as an auxiliary emergency operations center for county emergency management, you'll be charged with interfering with emergency operations. Third, I'll personally ensure that charges are filed against the HOA board for abuse of power and harassment. You can't do that, Patricia sputtered. This is a private community matter. Not anymore it isn't, Rachel said. The moment you decided to steal emergency equipment during a declared disaster, it became a criminal matter. Now get off our property before you make things worse for yourselves. The two men who'd come to help looked at each other, then at Patricia. One of them shook his head. I'm out. This is crazy. He dropped the bolt cutters in the snow and started walking away. The other man followed quickly. Sharon grabbed Patricia's arm. Come on, this isn't worth it. But Patricia was beyond reason now. She yanked her arm free and took a step toward the generator. We have a right to community resources during an emergency. Take one more step and you'll be explaining that to a judge, Rachel said, her voice cold. I could hear sirens in the distance now, getting closer. Patricia heard them too, and some of the fight went out of her. She stood there for a moment, trembling with rage or cold or both, before finally turning away. This isn't over, she hissed. The board will be hearing about this. There will be fines, sanctions. There will be lawsuits, Rachel corrected. Against you personally, not just the HOA. For harassment, attempted theft, and abuse of authority. I'd suggest you consult with a real attorney before you do anything else. Patricia stormed off, with Sharon and Dale hurrying after her. We watched them pile back into the SUV and drive away just as a sheriff's department vehicle pulled up in front of our house, its lights flashing red and blue through the falling snow. The deputy who got out was a tall, broad-shouldered man in his 40s who I recognized from various neighborhood events. He made his way carefully up our front walk, and we met him at the front door. Evening, Director Navarro, he said, nodding to Rachel. Got a call about a potential theft in progress. Evening, Deputy Martinez, Rachel replied. Thanks for coming out in this weather. The situation has been resolved for now, but I wanted to document what happened. We invited him in and Rachel explained the situation while I made coffee. Deputy Martinez took notes, occasionally shaking his head in disbelief. So let me get this straight, he said. The HOA president wanted to take your generator to power the community clubhouse, and when you refused, she came back with people ready to cut it free and haul it away. That's exactly right, I said. I have the notice they gave me right here. I handed him the paper Patricia had thrust at me earlier, Martinez read it over, his expression growing more incredulous. "This is one of the most ridiculous things I've ever seen. And I once had a guy try to citizens arrest his neighbor for having a lawn gnome he didn't like." "So what happens now?" I asked. "Well, technically they didn't actually commit a crime since they left before taking anything," Martinez said. "But I can file a report about the attempted theft and the threats. If they come back, call 911 immediately. Don't confront them yourselves." "Understood," Rachel said. "I'll also be filing a formal complaint with the county attorney's office first thing tomorrow. And I'll be documenting this as an interference with emergency operations." Martinez nodded approvingly. "Good. People get weird during disasters. Panic makes them do stupid things. But this HOA president sounds like she was already pretty far down that road before the storm hit." He was right about that. Patricia had been a thorn in the neighborhood's side since she'd been elected HOA president 2 years ago. She was the type who measured people's grass height with a ruler and sent violation notices if you were half an inch over the limit. She tried to ban all political signs, all holiday decorations except during specific date ranges, and had even attempted to restrict what colors people could paint their mailboxes. Most of the neighborhood just ignored her increasingly unhinged demands, but she had a core group of followers who seemed to thrive on the petty tyranny of HOA rule enforcement. Sharon and Dale were her lieutenants, always ready to back up whatever insane policy Patricia dreamed up. After Deputy Martinez left, Rachel and I sat down at the kitchen table with fresh cups of coffee. The wind was still howling outside, and I could see the snow accumulating against the windows at an alarming rate. The weatherman had predicted 36 inches of snow before the storm ended, and we were well on our way to hitting that mark. "I can't believe she actually tried it," I said, wrapping my hands around the warm mug. "I mean, I knew she was power-hungry, but this is something else." "She saw an opportunity," Rachel said. "In her mind, the emergency gave her carte blanche to do whatever she wanted in the name of the community good. People like that are dangerous during disasters. Speaking of which, how are things looking out there? Overall, I mean." Rachel sighed, and I could see the exhaustion in her eyes. "Not great. We've got hundreds of people without power, multiple accidents on the highways, and several elderly residents who need to be evacuated from their homes. The National Guard has been activated to help with transportation and welfare checks. It's going to be a long night." "What about the clubhouse?" I asked. "I mean, putting aside the whole stealing my generator thing, do they actually need a warming center in the neighborhood?" Rachel pulled out her phone and checked something. "According to our latest reports, the power company estimates service won't be restored for at least 48 hours, maybe longer depending on how much damage the lines take from the ice and wind. So yes, a warming center would be helpful. But it needs to be properly organized and staffed, not just run by an HOA president on a power trip." "Can you make that happen?" "I can make some calls," Rachel said. "We have protocols for setting up emergency shelters. The county can provide supplies, trained personnel, and emergency power if needed. But it would need to be run as an official county emergency shelter, not an HOA facility." She made a few more calls, speaking with various county officials and emergency coordinators. I listened as she explained the situation and arranged for the clubhouse to be assessed as a potential shelter site. Within an hour, she had a team ready to deploy the next morning, weather permitting, to set up a proper warming center with county-provided generators, supplies, and trained staff. "There," she said with satisfaction. "Now people will actually get help instead of being used as pawns in Patricia's power games." Our kids came downstairs around 8, hungry and wondering what all the commotion had been about earlier. I made grilled cheese sandwiches and soup while Rachel explained a simplified version of what had happened. Mrs. Donnelly tried to steal our generator. My son Zachary asked, his eyes wide. He was 12, old enough to understand property rights and the concept of theft. She tried, I said. But she didn't succeed. That's crazy, my daughter Zoe said. She was 10 and had a very strong sense of justice. That's stealing. You could go to jail for that. Yes, you could, Rachel agreed, which is why she backed down when I explained the consequences. After dinner, I went back outside to check on the generator again. The storm showed no signs of letting up, and I had to dig my way through newly accumulated snow to reach the pad where the generator sat. Everything looked secure, and the machine was still running perfectly. I added some fuel from the reserve cans, making sure we'd have plenty to get through the night. When I came back inside, stomping snow off my boots, Rachel was on another call. She covered the phone and mouthed county attorney at me. I gave her a thumbs up and went to get cleaned up. By the time I came back downstairs, she'd finished the call and was typing rapidly on her laptop. "Good news," she said without looking up. "The county attorney is very interested in our little HOA situation. Apparently, this isn't the first complaint they've received about Patricia Donnelly." "Really?" "Yep. Turns out she's been issuing bogus fines and threatening legal action against residents for months. There are at least 6 other families who have filed complaints. The county attorney has been building a case, and what happened today might be the final straw they need." "To do what?" "To investigate whether the HOA board is operating within legal bounds," Rachel explained. "HOAs have a lot of power, but they're not above the law. If they're abusing that power, harassing residents, or violating state statutes, they can be held accountable." I felt a sense of grim satisfaction at that. Patricia had made life miserable for a lot of people in the neighborhood with her petty rules and vindictive enforcement. It would be poetic justice if her attempt to steal our generator ended up being the thing that brought her down. The rest of the evening was relatively quiet. Rachel fielded more calls, coordinating response efforts across the county. I helped the kids with homework and then let them stay up late watching movies since school had been canceled for the next day. The power stayed on thanks to our faithful generator, and our house remained a warm, safe haven while the blizzard raged outside. Around 11, just as I was thinking about heading to bed, someone started pounding on the front door again. Rachel and I exchanged glances, and I felt my stomach sink. Not again. This time when I opened the door, I found a half-frozen man I recognized as Kevin Chen, who lived 3 houses down. He was shaking violently, his lips blue with cold. "Please," he stammered. "My wife, she has pneumonia. We need help. The cold, it's making her worse." I tried to call 911, but the lines are jammed. Rachel was already moving, grabbing her coat and emergency kit. "Bring him in," she called to me. "Kevin, sit down by the fireplace. We need to warm you up." I guided Kevin inside while Rachel made rapid-fire calls. Within minutes, she had an ambulance dispatch authorized, though with the conditions outside it would take time to reach us. "How bad is your wife?" Rachel asked Kevin, all business now. "She's having trouble breathing," Kevin said, his teeth chattering. "She's had pneumonia for a week, but the doctor said she could recover at home with antibiotics. But now with the power out and the house getting so cold, I don't know. She's getting worse." "Okay, here's what we're going to do," Rachel said. "An ambulance is on the way, but it might be 30 minutes or more. In the meantime, we need to stabilize her condition. Do you have oxygen at home?" Kevin shook his head. "Just the medication and a nebulizer, but that needs power." "Right. Okay." Rachel grabbed a portable battery pack from her emergency supplies. This should power a nebulizer for a while. We're going to go over there now and keep her stable until the ambulance arrives." I looked outside at the raging blizzard. "Rachel, it's dangerous out there." "It's more dangerous to wait," she said firmly. "Kevin, can you walk back with us?" He nodded, though he still looked like he might collapse. I grabbed more winter gear and followed Rachel and Kevin out into the storm. The wind nearly knocked me off my feet, and the snow was coming down so hard I could barely see my own hands in front of my face. We fought our way down the street, holding onto each other to keep from getting separated. Kevin's house was dark and silent when we reached it, and I could feel the cold radiating from the building even before we went inside. He'd been without power for at least 7 hours now, and the temperature inside couldn't have been much above 40 degrees. We found Kevin's wife, Jennifer, in bed, wrapped in every blanket they owned and still shivering. Her breathing was labored, and her lips had a disturbing blue tint. Rachel immediately went into emergency mode, checking vital signs and setting up the nebulizer with medication from Jennifer's prescriptions. "Jennifer, can you hear me?" Rachel asked. "I'm Rachel Navarro. I'm with Emergency Management. We're going to help you." Jennifer nodded weakly, too breathless to speak. I helped Kevin pile more blankets on his wife while Rachel got the nebulizer running. The small machine hummed to life, powered by the battery pack, and Jennifer began breathing in the medication. "Her oxygen saturation is low," Rachel said quietly to me. 85%. It should be above 95. She needs to be in a hospital." We stayed there for what felt like hours but was probably only 20 minutes before we saw flashing lights outside. The ambulance had made it, along with a fire department SUV for additional support. The EMTs came in with oxygen and a stretcher, and within minutes they had Jennifer stabilized and were preparing to transport her. "Thank you," Kevin said to us, tears streaming down his face. "Thank you so much." I didn't know what to do. "You did the right thing coming to get help," Rachel assured him. "Are you going to ride with her?" He nodded. "Our kids are at my mother's house in Boulder. They got stuck there before the storm hit." After the ambulance left, Rachel and I made our way back home through the continuing blizzard. I was exhausted and frozen through, but there was something else weighing on my mind. "That could have been really bad," I said once we were back inside, stripping off our snow-covered outer layers. "Yeah," Rachel agreed. "If Kevin had waited much longer, Jennifer might not have made it. Respiratory failure is no joke, especially when someone's already compromised with pneumonia." "So the warming center idea isn't completely crazy," I said. "People really do need help." "The warming center is a good idea," Rachel corrected. "Patricia's execution was insane. There's a right way and a wrong way to handle these situations. She chose the wrong way." The next morning dawned clear and cold, with brilliant sunshine reflecting off the snow-covered landscape. The blizzard had finally blown itself out, leaving behind a winter wonderland that would have been beautiful if it wasn't causing so much hardship. Our street looked like something from a postcard, with snow drifts reaching halfway up some of the first-floor windows. The power was still out in the neighborhood, but our generator kept chugging along. Rachel was up early, back on the phone coordinating county response efforts. The county was sending out snow removal teams, welfare check crews, and emergency supply distributions. And as promised, a team was being dispatched to set up the warming center at the clubhouse. Around 10 in the morning, I saw county trucks pulling up to the clubhouse, which was visible from our front window. Workers began unloading generators, heaters, cots, and supplies. Within an hour, they had the building powered and warming up. A county emergency management team set up a proper intake system, and residents began arriving to get warm, charge their phones, and receive information about resources available to them. I was watching this operation with satisfaction when Patricia's SUV came roaring down the street, skidding to a stop in front of the clubhouse. She got out and marched toward the entrance, clearly agitated. I couldn't hear what she was saying, but I could see her gesturing angrily at the county workers. My phone rang. It was Rachel, calling from her command post upstairs. "Hey, can you see what's happening at the clubhouse?" she asked. "Yeah, Patricia just showed up and she looks pissed." "Figures. I'm getting calls from the team there saying she's demanding they leave. Can you go over there? I need someone on site who can document what's happening if she makes this difficult." I bundled up again and made my way to the clubhouse, which was only about 100 yards from our house. By the time I arrived, Patricia was in full Karen mode, red-faced and practically screaming at a patient-looking county official in an emergency management vest. "This is private property," Patricia was shouting. "You can't just come in here and take over our facilities without permission from the HOA board." "Madam, this facility is being used as an emergency shelter under the county's disaster response protocols," the official, whose name tag read Sarah Mills, explained calmly. "We have the authority to commandeer facilities during declared emergencies for public safety purposes. I don't care about your authority. This is an HOA clubhouse. It's for the use of residents only. And it is being used for residents," Sarah pointed out. "Residents who need warming shelter during this emergency." I recognized several of our neighbors inside the clubhouse, including elderly Mrs. Patterson from 2 doors down and the Johnson family with their 3 small kids. They all looked grateful to be somewhere warm, completely oblivious to Patricia's tantrum outside. "You had no right to bring in county equipment without consulting us," Patricia continued. "The HOA board decides how this facility is used." "Actually," I said, stepping forward, "I think you'll find that during a state of emergency, county authorities have pretty broad powers to use whatever facilities are necessary to protect public safety." Patricia whirled around, her eyes narrowing when she saw me. This is your fault. You're the one who called the county." "No, my wife coordinated with the county to set up a proper emergency shelter," I corrected. "Because that's her job. You wanted to play at running a warming center using stolen equipment. These professionals are actually helping people." "I was trying to help people," Patricia shrieked. "By stealing my property," I asked. "That's an interesting definition of help." Sarah held up a hand. "Folks, this isn't productive." "Madam, if you have concerns about the use of this facility, you're welcome to file a formal complaint with the county attorney's office. But right now, this shelter is operational and will remain so until the emergency is over and power is restored to the area." Patricia looked like she wanted to argue more, but she seemed to realize she was fighting a losing battle. She settled for shooting both of us poisonous looks before storming off. "Thank you for coming over," Sarah said to me once Patricia was gone. "Director Navarro mentioned you might have some background on the HOA situation here." I gave her a quick rundown of what had happened the previous evening, and she took notes with increasingly wide eyes. "That's absolutely insane," she said when I finished. "I've heard of HOAs overstepping their authority before, but actual attempted theft, that's a new one." "Welcome to Lakewood Meadows," I said wryly, "where the HOA president thinks she's an absolute monarch." The warming center operated smoothly throughout the day. More neighbors showed up, grateful for somewhere warm to spend time while their houses slowly turned into iceboxes. The county workers were professional and organized, nothing like the chaos that Patricia's plan would have created. Around 3 in the afternoon, I was back home when my doorbell rang. This time it was Deputy Martinez again, along with another deputy I didn't recognize. "Afternoon, Mr. Peterson," Martinez said. Is Director Navarro available? She's upstairs in her office. Come on in. Rachel came down a few minutes later, and Martinez introduced his partner as Deputy Harris from the county attorney's office. We're here about the situation yesterday, Martinez explained. After reviewing the reports and talking to the county attorney, we've decided to move forward with charges against Patricia Donnelly. I felt a jolt of surprise. Charges? For what, exactly? Attempted theft during a declared emergency is a Class 4 felony in Colorado, Deputy Harris explained. We have your statement, Deputy Martinez's report, and the threatening notice that Miss Donnelly gave you. We also have evidence that she returned to your property with tools and assistance to forcibly remove the generator. That's sufficient for charges. What happens now? Rachel asked. We'll be arresting Miss Donnelly later today, Harris said. We wanted to give you a heads up in case there's any blowback in the neighborhood. We'll also be interviewing the other board members to determine their level of involvement and culpability. After the deputies left, Rachel and I looked at each other. This got serious fast, I said. She committed a serious crime, Rachel replied. Or tried to, anyway. You don't get to steal people's property just because you think it's for the greater good. That's not how civilized society works. I almost feel bad for her, I said. Almost. Don't. She's been terrorizing this neighborhood for 2 years. Maybe this will be a wake-up call. The power came back on around 6 that evening, much sooner than anyone had expected. Apparently, the utility crews had worked around the clock to repair the downed lines. One by one, lights started coming on in houses up and down the street. Our generator finally got a rest, and I shut it down to give it a break and let it cool. The warming center at the clubhouse stayed open through the evening, making sure everyone who needed assistance got home safely and had functioning heat before closing up for the night. It was a well-organized operation, professional and efficient. Everything Patricia's plan wouldn't have been. The next morning, word spread through the neighborhood that Patricia had been arrested. The gossip chain was on fire, with different versions of the story making the rounds. Some people were shocked, others were delighted, and a few seemed to think it was all some kind of misunderstanding. Sharon Miller showed up at my door around noon, looking nervous and uncomfortable. "Mr. Peterson, I wanted to apologize," she said immediately when I opened the door. "What we tried to do was wrong. I got caught up in Patricia's enthusiasm and didn't think it through. I never should have gone along with it." I studied her for a moment. She seemed genuinely contrite, which was more than I'd expected. "Did the deputies talk to you?" I asked. She nodded miserably. "This morning." They asked a lot of questions about who knew what and who was responsible for the decision. I told them the truth, that it was mostly Patricia's idea, but Dale and I went along with it. They said I might be charged as an accessory. "That's between you and the county attorney," I said. "But for what it's worth, walking away when you did probably helped your case." "I wanted to help people," Sharon said quietly. "I really did. I just went about it the completely wrong way." After she left, Rachel came downstairs with more news. "So the county attorney's office has been digging into the HOA's finances," she said. "Want to guess what they found? Embezzlement, close. Patricia has been using HOA funds to pay herself a salary." I blinked. "She what?" "Apparently she decided that being HOA president was so much work that she deserved compensation. So she's been paying herself $1,500 a month from the HOA account for the past year, without board approval or member knowledge. That's got to be illegal. Very illegal. It's basically theft. The county attorney is adding additional charges of embezzlement and fraud." Rachel shook her head. This woman really thought she was untouchable. Over the next few days, more information came out. It turned out Patricia had been running the HOA like her own personal fiefdom, issuing fines that went directly into the general fund, which she then dipped into for various expenses. She'd bought a new laptop, a printer, and even a desk chair, all charged to the HOA and all sitting in her home office. A special meeting was called by the remaining board members, and the neighborhood turned out in force. Dale Ramsey opened the meeting looking shell-shocked. As you all know, recent events have brought to light serious misconduct by our president, Patricia Donnelly, he said. The board is conducting a full audit of HOA finances and operations. We've already discovered several irregularities that we're working to address. You mean the embezzlement? Someone called out from the audience. Dale winced. Yes, that. We're cooperating fully with the county attorney's investigation. Additionally, the board is implementing new oversight procedures to prevent this kind of thing from happening again. The meeting went on for 2 hours, with angry residents demanding answers and accountability. By the end, both Dale and Sharon had resigned from the board, leaving it without a quorum to conduct business. An emergency election was scheduled for the following month to replace them and elect a new president. Rachel and I skipped most of the drama, though we heard about it from neighbors. We were both busy with our own work. Rachel was still coordinating long-term recovery efforts across the county, and I had my own job to get back to now that the immediate emergency was over. A few weeks later, Deputy Martinez stopped by to give us an update. Patricia Donnelly took a plea deal, he told us over coffee in our living room. She's pleading guilty to attempted theft, embezzlement, and fraud. She'll do 6 months in county jail, 3 years probation, and has to pay full restitution to the HOA for the embezzled funds. 6 months seems light, I said. It's her first offense and she's cooperating with the investigation, Martinez explained. Plus, the county attorney felt that some jail time plus probation was more important than trying for a longer sentence that might not stick after a trial. What about Sharon and Dale? They're getting probation and community service. The prosecutor determined they were following Patricia's lead rather than being primary actors in the attempted theft, though they'll both have criminal records now. After Martinez left, Rachel and I sat quietly for a moment. You know what the craziest part of all this is? I said finally. What? If Patricia had just knocked on our door and asked nicely, I probably would have helped set up power for a warming center. Not by giving her my generator, but I could have helped them rent one or coordinate with the county for emergency power. Instead, she went full tyrant and ended up destroying her life. That's the thing about people like her, Rachel said. They're so convinced that they're right and everyone else is wrong that they can't see reasonable solutions. It has to be their way, with them in control, or it's not acceptable. The new HOA board was elected in March. The neighborhood chose 3 people who'd been vocal critics of Patricia's regime, and their first act was to revise the bylaws to include better oversight and accountability measures. They also formally apologized to me and several other residents who'd been targeted by Patricia's enforcement campaigns. Life in Lakewood Meadows gradually returned to normal, though the generator incident became neighborhood legend. People would point out my house to new residents and tell the story of the HOA president who tried to steal a generator during a blizzard and ended up in jail. Kevin and Jennifer Chen became good friends of ours after the emergency. Jennifer made a full recovery from her pneumonia, and both of them were effusive in their gratitude for Rachel's quick response that night. They insisted on having us over for dinner at least once a month, which I wasn't complaining about since Jennifer was an amazing cook. The warming center incident led to better emergency preparedness throughout the neighborhood. Several other families installed generators after seeing how useful ours had been. The HOA used some of its recovered embezzled funds to purchase an emergency generator for the clubhouse, properly installed and permitted, so it could serve as a real warming center if needed in future emergencies. Rachel continued her work as emergency management director, earning recognition from the governor for her handling of the blizzard response. She was proud of the fact that, despite the severity of the storm, there had been no deaths in Jefferson County attributable to the weather. The quick establishment of warming centers and aggressive welfare check programs had kept vulnerable residents safe. As for me, I became something of a local celebrity in emergency preparedness circles. I was invited to give talks at neighborhood association meetings about the importance of disaster readiness. I always made sure to mention that having a generator wasn't the only solution. People could prepare in lots of ways, from having emergency supplies to knowing their neighbors to having plans for different types of disasters. The generator itself continued to serve us well. We had a couple more power outages over the next year. Nothing as dramatic as the blizzard, but enough to make me grateful we had reliable backup power. And every time I heard it start up, I thought about that night when Patricia Donnelly tried to take it and ended up learning a very expensive lesson about the limits of HOA authority. One afternoon in May, almost 6 months after the incident, I was working in the yard when a car pulled up that I didn't recognize. A woman got out, middle-aged and wearing business casual attire. She approached with a somewhat tentative smile. "Mr. Peterson, I'm Margaret Freeman. I'm the new president of the Lakewood Meadows HOA. Nice to meet you," I said, shaking her offered hand. "What can I do for you?" "I wanted to stop by personally to thank you," she said. What happened with Patricia was a nightmare, but in a weird way, it was the wake-up call this community needed. We were letting her get away with all kinds of overreach because nobody wanted to deal with the confrontation. Your refusal to back down forced everything into the light. "I was just protecting my property," I said. "You were standing up to a bully," Margaret corrected, "and it made a difference. The new board is committed to running things properly within the law and with respect for residents' rights. We're an HOA, not a dictatorship." "That's good to hear." Also, I wanted to mention that we're working on a neighborhood emergency preparedness committee. Given your experience and your wife's expertise, we'd love to have you both involved if you're interested. I thought about it. Despite everything that had happened, I did care about this community. These were my neighbors, the people I saw every day, whose kids played with my kids. Making sure everyone was better prepared for emergencies seemed like a worthy cause. "Let me talk to Rachel," I said. "But yeah, I think we'd be interested in that." Margaret's smile widened. "Excellent. I'll send you the details. And Mr. Peterson, I promise we'll never try to take your generator," I laughed. "Appreciate that." After she left, I went inside to find Rachel in the kitchen, looking at something on her tablet. "Who was that?" she asked. "New HOA president. Wants us to join an emergency preparedness committee." "Huh, that's actually not a terrible idea. That's what I thought. Times have changed." Rachel set down her tablet and looked at me. "You know, as horrible as that whole situation was, I'm kind of glad it happened." "Why?" "Because it exposed a serious problem before it got even worse." Patricia was escalating, getting more and more extreme with her power trips. If the generator thing hadn't happened, what would have been next? How far would she have gone? I thought about the Karen I'd encountered on my doorstep that snowy evening, so certain of her authority and so willing to take what wasn't hers. Rachel was right. Patricia had been on a trajectory that would have eventually led to an even bigger confrontation. Better that it happened over a generator than over something that might have put someone in actual danger. Plus, Rachel continued with a slight smile. It's a pretty great story. The HOA president who picked a fight with the wrong family and ended up in jail. Don't forget the embezzlement and fraud. That too. Though honestly, the attempted generator theft is the more entertaining part. We joined the Emergency Preparedness Committee, which turned out to be a great experience. We helped the neighborhood develop response plans for various types of disasters, organized supply drives, and even ran training sessions on basic emergency skills. The community became much more resilient and better prepared, which gave me a sense of satisfaction that went beyond just protecting my own family. Patricia Donnelly served her 6 months and disappeared from the neighborhood entirely after her release. I heard through the grapevine that she'd moved to Arizona to live with her sister. I never saw her again, which was fine by me. The generator continued to sit on its pad behind our house, ready to spring into action whenever needed. It became a symbol in my mind, not just of preparedness, but of the importance of standing up for what's right, even when it's difficult. Especially when it's difficult. Looking back on everything that happened, from that first knock on the door during the blizzard to the resolution months later, I realized that the incident had changed me in subtle ways. I was more engaged with my community, more aware of the importance of good governance and accountability, and more willing to push back against unreasonable authority. And I never, ever took my generator for granted again. The story could have ended there, but there was one more chapter to come. About a year after the incident, I got a letter in the mail from the Colorado State Legislature. They were passing a new law specifically addressing HOA overreach during emergencies, inspired in part by what had happened to us. The law clearly defined the limits of HOA authority during declared disasters, and included stiff penalties for HOA boards that exceeded those limits. They invited Rachel and me to the bill signing ceremony, where the governor publicly thanked us for bringing the issue to light. It was surreal, standing there in the Capitol building, knowing that our confrontation with a power-hungry HOA president had led to actual legal reform that would protect other families from similar situations. Never thought my generator would end up making history, I joked to Rachel as we drove home from Denver. Everything makes history if it happens at the right time to the right people, she replied. We just happened to be in a position to do something about an injustice. That's all. But it felt like more than that. It felt like proof that ordinary people, standing up for their rights in small ways, could create ripples that turned into waves of positive change. Back home in Lakewood Meadows, life continued its normal rhythms. The generator sat ready, the neighborhood was better prepared, and the HOA operated with transparency and respect for residents' rights. It was how things should have been all along. And every time winter came around and the weather forecast started predicting storms, I made sure the generator was serviced, the fuel was fresh, and everything was ready to go. Because being prepared wasn't just about having the right equipment. It was about taking responsibility for yourself and your family, about not expecting others to solve your problems, and about being ready to help your community when crisis struck. The generator never became a point of controversy again. Instead, it became something the neighborhood was proud of, a symbol of the community's commitment to resilience and preparedness. Other families followed suit, installing their own emergency power systems. The neighborhood became known in the area as one of the best prepared communities for disasters. And through it all, that generator kept running whenever it was needed, a steady hum of reliability in an uncertain world. It had been worth every penny of the $12,000 I'd spent on it, not just for the power it provided, but for everything that had come from defending my right to own it. Sometimes I wondered what Patricia had been thinking that night when she'd come to my door demanding I surrender my property. Did she really believe she had the authority to take it? Did she think she could intimidate me into compliance? Or was she so deep into her power trip that she couldn't see how unreasonable she was being? I'd never know the answers to those questions. And honestly, it didn't matter anymore. What mattered was that the situation had been resolved, justice had been served, and the community had learned valuable lessons about governance, accountability, and the limits of authority. The kids were older now, more aware of the world and its complexities. They'd learned from watching how Rachel and I handled the situation that sometimes you have to stand up to unreasonable demands, even when it's uncomfortable. Especially when it's uncomfortable. Those were lessons that would serve them well throughout their lives. As for the generator, it sat on its pad, ready and waiting. A sentinel against the darkness, a bulwark against the cold, and a reminder that sometimes the right preparation at the right time can make all the difference between disaster and merely inconvenience. And if any future HOA president ever got ideas about trying to take it, well, we had a pretty good template for how to handle that situation now. Though I doubted anyone would be that foolish after what had happened to Patricia Donnelly. The story of the HOA president who tried to seize a generator during a blizzard became part of neighborhood lore, told and retold, sometimes embellished, but always fundamentally true. And at its heart was a simple lesson: respect people's rights, follow the law, and remember that being in charge doesn't make you a dictator. It was a lesson Patricia Donnelly had learned the hard way, but one that had made the entire community stronger in the end.